we'll do it out of it. So somebody sees a, opportunity here, and I'm seeing it just through, the sales and whatnot, people moving in.
Okay.
I have a question. Do you have any breakdown of the population? The growth as well.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know if are you seeing increases in 65 ages.
Well, that's a good question, and we'll kind of transition into that
Okay.
in a moment. Now, I didn't take it that specific with population growth. The governor's office does provide that, if I'm not mistaken, by age and sex. But those were as far as those demographics go. So,
I mean, I think the trends that we can already see, and if you flip to page 4, you'll see that that's the highlights of the trend from over the past 10 or so years. You can see that the county has had an aging population, and that's really not a shocker because that's happened in literally every county in Middle Georgia, and is certainly the broad statewide and national trend of everybody's getting older and living longer.
right.
So there are some things that you might see in that regard where the population is much more sort of even among some of the demographics and the age ranges than you had or so 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you saw a very big dip of sort of a missing group of folks in that maybe we'll say 20 to 35-ish year range. That dip is smaller now, and that you've got more folks in that young adult area than you used to have. That's probably one of the most significant changes, in addition to just more folks getting older. But I think you can still look at that data and see, you've got folks who maybe went to school here in Jones County, but then left and have not come back yet. And that's still one of those areas where you've seen the decline. But in terms of overall population, that's roughly offset by continuing to have folks who are a little bit older, and just sort of growth in general as folks stay here and continue to age. So
Right.
I don't know that may not answer your full question about what to expect from the next 30
Actually, that next, I wasn't going ahead in your presentation.
No.
Those graphs actually show that the trends are that a lot of the growth is in the older, I say older,
Right.
that's me, okay, 45 to, and above seem to be growing, but some of the younger seem to be actually decreasing. I mean, I see that in my own family.
Right.
But we've got more of the middle age, that 20, 30, 45-year-old that are staying too. So that's creating the housing shortage that we need.
Right.
I was just going to say, educationally, I think our population has stayed pretty much what you were seeing over here. It's fairly consistent.
Okay.
There's not a lot of jump or, decrease, increase.
So you're saying the school system population has remained
About like
consistent?
5,200, about the same.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say, looking at like where we're at right now, one of the smaller groups is the 0 to 5 range. So it could be that in a couple of years you might see a slight dip, but then maybe that comes back again.
Right.
And you're familiar with that going in waves and stuff anyway. So
Right. Yes, as Greg mentioned and as you pointed out, it presented in front of you on slide number 4 is just a comparison of the 2010 population to what's actually put in 2022. Just because of how the data works out, it just works out a little bit as well, if not a little bit better, to show 2022 than 2020 population. But the population is becoming more distributed, and you, as mentioned, you are getting more distribution of population in the older, we'll say older age groups, but also the distribution is becoming more even for those middle age groups. And so I appreciate your comments because it does reflect part of the conditions that we have been seeing and provided. So thank you for that. Other comments? Mr. Mulvey?
Would you say that in general, Jones County is planning for population growth over the next 20 years or so? Or, and if it is, are we planning for, slight growth? Are we expecting the big boom in growth or relatively steady?
Well, we're increasing the water and sewer intake, so that's something positive that we're doing as commissioners to help with that growth. I think getting high-speed internet countywide, that also increases us for people looking for other places, so locally be able to move to and work from home.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about the fund infrastructure stuff later too, but so general consensus of our planning for some growth, but sort of matching the projections. We aren't expecting the county to double in size necessarily, more of a
No, we don't have radio.
SMO control. Yes, there you go.
That's the answer.
Figured that was the case, but sometimes we hear folks say like, "Oh yeah, we're growing by leaps and bounds," even though the data, the projections don't show that at all. So that's why we ask the questions, just to make sure.
Right. So, yes, I appreciate those comments because it does reflect part of our thoughts.
Let's talk about some economic development.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Okay, all right. Just looking at income, employment, and workforce readiness, which the actual tables begin on page number 6. What we have graphed in front of us is educational attainment. Just looking at educational attainment, the bachelor's degrees, as reported by census data, is about 15% less than the region as a whole, and is also down from the state as a whole. And I say that just to kind of bring up the comment, do you feel like that may be reflective of, well, two questions. Do you feel like that is an accurate reflection? And if it has accuracy, do you believe it also reflects the potential of that population group decline from, like Greg mentioned, 20 to 24 age group? And so I'll open with those two questions. Comments?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, so just looking at educational attainment, and Greg may can add to this, when we're looking at the categories of bachelor's degrees or higher, for Jones County, there's not, the percentage is down from that of the state. So, my two questions is just kind of looking at it, how do you feel, or do you feel as if that number is truly reflective? Then my second question is, if there is a reflection that this may be a true value, then do you feel like it could be also dealing with, in the last 10 years, there has also been a decline in population that would be young adults that would maybe be entering back into Jones County after education. But not leading one direction enough, just opening up for comments.
And maybe a different way to ask the question is, are there jobs here to attract very highly educated young people
Yes, definitely.
In Jones County?
in Jones County?
Yes.
Just your school system, your
Okay.
government work.
That's what the schools do, yeah, and a lot of that is people live outside the community.
And Stellan, with your healthcare
Yeah, I
background,
mean, you have some educational requirements for certain folks, but probably
like your
80%
LPNs are considered a,
less
right,
less
so
than
that's,
bachelor's.
and then they don't go to get their BS in, so even though that's the highest growth pattern is in the healthcare field. That's where you probably got your LPNs, but then you don't go on and get the BSN part of it, so.
Yeah.
I would look at it differently. As an educator, I would look at it from a college and career readiness perspective. Okay? And the question might be, based on the actual youth-based population over a 10-year period, what was the driving force or the indicator for which a student would go and attain a bachelor's degree? And is that the priority for our school system, our economic development team, and then, of course, extended our elected officials? And if you drove that into the House, you have to ask yourself the question, do parents here value that? And where the largest demographic has high school only, there's a theory that if you're educated, you try to produce more educated people. Because the priority is placed on that. I have a master's degree, so I don't expect my children to have anything less than a bachelor's degree. I have 2 children that will probably be doctors when they get done. One will finish nursing school shortly. So that's the expectation in the household. If that is not the intention in Jones County in general because of workforce, right? Or because of the interest, then it might not be there. And then from a workforce development standpoint, we do not have the workforce that requires or necessitates that, but we know we travel out to get jobs. So really what we desire and what the workforce needs is a gap and a disconnect in between. To go to Robins Air Force Base in a regular job, you don't need a degree.
Right.
But if you want to advance, you might have to have one.
Right.
But we don't necessarily have those connections yet. I think we're working on them at the school level. But that'll take time. And I think in 10 years, you might see something different. But we also have a very handy community, I would like to believe. Most of the guys in this room probably can operate some equipment that I can't, right? So I went to school for something different. And there are a lot of our kids that follow in that pattern.
Yeah.
I would agree with the family expectations, household, in the family. The College and Career Academy is within the last 5 years, maybe. And it is very vibrant as far as careers, not necessarily pushing that college degree, but there's also a very big population of our students who get college credits in the high school. So we've got both going, and I would agree that most of our jobs here probably don't require, it's more of a career, a skilled job, more so than a college job. But
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the College and Career Academy because that was just established about 5 or so years ago at this point. Forgive me if I'm slightly off, but this data, because the census tends to like to give time for the data to settle out, they start measuring educational attainment at 25 and older, because you're not going to hold a 16-year-old against not having their high school diploma yet, obviously. But the impacts of that may not be showing up in this data yet. But even with that said, I think one thing you can see is that, Jones County does put an emphasis on making sure that there is the technical training, the skills training, because you've got more folks here on average than compared to elsewhere in the state who have an associate's degree or who have some college. So I think that does show that there are ways that your local economy is kind of meeting that section there of making sure folks are skilled and trained, even if that may not necessarily be a bachelor's degree or a master's degree that they come back for a job for.
that was a hard mindset to get to people too, and as a counselor in the counselor's office many years ago, that was such a stigma. If you're not going to college, you gotta go to college, gotta go to college. And that wasn't the path for every student. And now more parents accept that yes, if I want to go into business for myself, and there's a lot of stressing being your own business person, starting a business. There's a lot of that now. which the bachelor's degree, yes, it would help, but it's seen as, not totally necessary anymore to be successful. That's,
Yeah.
Looking at some 22 data, our graduation rate was 90%, and our CCRCI ranged anywhere from 73.3 to 79.7 in terms of readiness. Okay, so as an educator, again, I talk from a prepared as opposed to ready. You might be ready, but you're not prepared to go. And then those that do go may not be prepared to stay because it takes some staying time to finish it.
Right.
And I would love to see the data from the school system to see actually how many kids actually go off to college. And not necessarily dual enrollment, but really who goes out and then what that retention number looks like. And I really would love to see the data that says what type of careers do they take. Because that kind of tells us if they're coming back to this area too. If it aligns with education, healthcare, and maybe manufacturing, we know that's sort of our regional designation. But if it's something else, we already know they're going someplace else. Right. My kids are not coming back.
Well, to echo some of the things he's saying, out of the group that lives down our way, Steve's folks know them, all of the ones that have obtained bachelor degrees and higher, they're gone. They're not coming back because the opportunities are not here. Those that have not sought, grad degrees, bachelor's degrees, or master's degrees, or whatever, most of them are here working in jobs. And you know what? I'm very thankful for them because they're the ones that fix our stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't want me anywhere near that kind of machine.
I think this is probably representative of what I would expect to see for our kids. The folks that are getting the, bachelor's and master's degrees and, advanced education,
Right.
they're going to Atlanta, they're going to Athens, or some of the law. Some of them may be fortunate enough to live here and work, but I think this is probably fairly representative
Right.
of the question.
And the next page actually hits on exactly that because it does show where folks tend to go for work. And then those two maps show relatively stable between, whether or not you're looking at, 10 years ago or today, in terms of, where folks go. The arrow pointing out is folks leaving the county for work, and you can see a lot more folks will leave Jones County for work than will come into Jones County for work.
Right.
That's not surprising, I think, because, you've got some very large cities nearby which tend to be employment centers and employment hubs.
Right.
And I would say there's been a slight increase in the number of people who do come into the county for work over the past 10 years or so.
Yes, and just to kind of build on what Greg says, so when you're looking at the image on slide 7, when we're saying going out to work, we mean residing in Jones County, but commuting out. So we're not saying a migration out of the county. We're saying that, of the population of Jones County, most of the population travel elsewhere for employment other than staying in the county. And as Greg also mentioned, for those that are coming into the county for work, that number has come up. So, we're talking about a 200 individual increase from those that reside outside the county but enter into the county for employment. And it's pretty consistent numbers between those that actually live in the county and stay in the county. So I think those reflect your comments. So.
But it does look like, the people going out, 2012, 11,000, now there's 9,500.
Yes.
That's been a pretty good drop. I guess
Yeah.
folks aren't working.
Yeah. So,
Well, they're moving away.
Yeah.
So, that's, to me, kind of, or retired.
yeah,
work group there, and so
Yes.
there's all.
I think that's the part that explains it the most is that you have had folks retiring. And if you've got an aging population, the percentage of that population that's working is going to go down slightly. assuming that folks are retiring at some point, but.
Ray, I see this in our community and some of the subdivisions around Ray. You have the high-speed internet that is coming in, and you have both husband and wife stay at home. They have huge jobs set up at each set of bedrooms, so they have their privacy in their work stations. And I see multiple families doing that and very successful with college degrees, but they're not leaving the county or they're not leaving the house except to go pick the kids up from school and come right back and get supper.
Yeah.
So that's a big trend.
But they might,
It
I mean,
is.
what about, is the counting on that, say if they're Geico, just because that's one of them? So they work in Macon because they work for Geico, but does it register if they're working at home?
That is a great question. And I don't think the census has truly caught up to that yet.
Because that's a new trend.
Yeah, so one thing we do notice in the data is that there is undoubtedly a portion of remote workers who are counted as living in the county but working elsewhere. And we know that for a fact because there's always a baseline in almost every county in our region. There will be a handful of maybe 2% or something that say they work in Fulton County, which is, downtown Atlanta. I don't think many people are commuting all the way from here to Fulton County every day. So I think that's one of those indicators of the folks living here and working elsewhere are sometimes going to get recorded as working in the county where their office is, even if they're full-time remote. But I don't know that the data is good enough or reliable enough to capture that all the time. And especially depending on the nature of the company, how dispersed they are versus do they have one corporate office or many, that could get even more complicated. So I think that's an area where we still need better data going into the future.
I'd be curious to see, because obviously it's 2021, what that number had looked like in 2019, like prior to COVID, to see if there was an impact there, because I'm sure, there's something that has affected the indicators, no question.
Yeah, and once the 22 and 23 data come out, I think you'll actually see it even more so. Because 2020, everybody was in the shock of COVID. 21 is when folks first started realizing, like, oh, wait a second, I can move elsewhere, or I can get a different job now. So yeah, I'd be interested to look at that too. So anyways. And I think if we look at the next slide here, that sort of wraps up some of the employment stuff by looking at trends of sectors that are either growing or declining in terms of where folks are employed. So Alex, if you want to take a few of those trending sectors.
Yeah, no, there's no real surprises here based on the conversation we've had. I've provided a table based on employment sectors comparing 2002, 2011, 2021. And this just shows a proportion of the industry or the employment sectors within the county. So it's kind of like a sliding scale. So it's just a proportion of all the jobs. And when we're looking at it proportionally, the top sector has been healthcare. That sector has successfully seen an increase of about 1.5% since 2011. And we're also seeing an increase in educational services, and also, I think also retail sales is also one that I noted. So it kind of reflects the statements that you said. I mean, the sectors that seem to have increased most have been those of healthcare and education. So I'll just open the floor up to comments about, if there's anything that we can add to that information before I talk about manufacturing.
I have something on education services, and I'm not really sure where it fits. According to GETA, it's one of the top 3 issues that we're having here currently in the state of Georgia, and Jones County is really seeing it. 5% of the population is under 5, but only 1.25% of those children have access to care. So when we're talking about bringing in population and bringing in industry and growth, is there growth, or is there room for familial growth? Is there room for access for those children to have adequate care and education. And right now in Jones County, there's not. And so finding a place where that fits in a development plan and in a growth plan.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, and I think you can see, I mean, you know, those types of care services would likely fall under either educational, or it could be under the healthcare, social assistance, depending on, you know, exactly the type of facility. But yeah, I mean, so that is something we've heard in several communities so far, is that, you know, having good quality, affordable daycare for kids is really essential, because, you know, it's a matter of, you know, for the parent, having them have the opportunity for employment and, you know, being able to take care and support the family, but then for the child itself, also having the opportunity for them to be growing, developing, and getting that head start, which is really essential to be successful at, you know, once they enter the public school system. So it's definitely something that we know is a priority to address. I don't necessarily have all the solutions, because I think some of them are solutions that go beyond the scope of what any one community can do, and will require some state and federal policy issues to look at it. But it certainly is something on the radar, that's an area where growth is needed to have adequate facilities to support kids if you're going to have any sort of economic or population growth.
That's a very wonderful comment. I appreciate you saying so.
I think the other thing we have to consider along with that is your pre-K availability, because if we don't have that, that's a no-go for families that have kids in that population. I don't know the number of slots in the county, but if it is randomized or, you know, lotterized, however you want to call it, and there's only 100 slots, well, that tells you how many families are going to be okay with that. Unless they're going to be stay-at-home families, and maybe they manage through that.
Yeah.
It's 357.
Slots.
And that's with the private daycares also.
Yeah, but we've got, I think, around 250-ish in our pre-K.
So that bumps us up to like 1.75%.
And then I think you have to drive to grade for pre-K, right?
Yeah, that was going to be the next comment.
Yeah.
We bus them.
They bus. They can ride a
But
bus.
only those children in that program get bus.
Yeah.
So then the other segment of children wouldn't get bus.
And
You make ones
Yeah,
that
it's
private.
private.
Yeah.
Yeah, ones that private would
Yeah.
not get bus, but public pre-K,
I want you to think about that just for a hot second and take it with you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about a 4-year-old on a bus or a 5-year-old on a bus? So just perspective. I know we're a school system, I thought too, but I'm not putting my 5-year-old on a bus.
I would say I'm not saying
Yeah, we've got a bus driver in the audience.
In Jones County, we transport about 4 and 5-year-olds for pre-K.
I would say bus-wise, we, out of that 275, is that what we say? We probably 120, we bus.
Yeah.
The parents pick up the rest.
and they're
And some of those are just simply bused between the pre-K and their district elementary school to go to after-school care.
Yeah.
So that number is probably a little bit higher than that, just because of the after-school care that is provided at the elementary level for those kids in those districts.
But in the rest of the region, about less than half is the same. There's really nowhere in the area that's looking at more than half of 4 and 5-year-olds being on the bus. It's about the same.
So, yeah, where that's something that, you know, local communities can help with the support infrastructure. Absolutely, that's something there. You know, in terms of the availability of, you know, the structural issues, we're going to put it in the plan and talk about it. I don't know what we will accomplish here right now at the regional level without state or federal support. Though.
I mean, even at DECAL, that's who I'm with the Department of Revenue Care.
Yeah.
Even at DECAL, that's the reason that I'm at these meetings, is we don't have the answer.
Ah.
So we're kind of like, if we can get into counties, if we can get into programs and say, what is the answer? Or is the answer county by county specific? Is it district by district specific? Is it?
I suppose all of the above.
And the issues that we've heard in other communities are twofold: of the care is too expensive and the people performing the care aren't getting paid enough.
Right.
And so that to me says there is a big resource gap because you can't, if both of those are a problem, there is no one solution that fixes both of those things.
So like my home district, I mean, my home is Savannah.
So,
So on average, it's $250 a week for childcare. That same childcare provider is getting paid about $10 an hour.
yeah.
So there's that big gap of parents can't afford it, but no one can afford to work in that industry.
And having a 2-year-old grandson that no services in Jones County had availability for, so 50 miles round trip to go pick him up in Macon and bring him back home in the afternoons because mom works 12-hour shifts, goes to work at 7, gets off at 7, and Macon's the only place that had availability for him.
Right, that's assuming that we have those 357 spots available. That's assuming that they're fully staffed.
Yes,
So
and
that's-
and we've got 2 daycare centers here that can't get fully staffed to take the number of kids that they were built for.
Yeah, so we have one that's actually, it's pretty big here, can take 131 children, and I don't have to pull the numbers to tell you they don't have 131
If
children.
children's aligned.
Children still have, yeah. I just know they don't have 131 children.
they
They don't
don't.
have the teachers.
They don't have to teach, I mean, they're constantly, he's been on the list since he was 6 weeks old.
Yeah.
I don't even have to look it up to tell you.
And I'm guessing that the Jones County Public Schools doesn't have a massive surplus of money sitting around to expand the pre-K program either.
No,
Right.
We don't have pre-K3 either.
Head Start, no, we don't have Head Start.
You don't have EHS or a Head Start in general.
We have a Head Start, but it's not up under the school.
It's Action Pack or its own.
It's
I got it.
on, yes, and we don't transport for that.
So it seems to me consensus that improvements could be made, but it's just the reality of the conditions in front of us, and we're gonna try to reflect those comments in our plan, so, I appreciate the discussion. One other number in jobs, in the employment sector, I wanna mention just for discussion's sake. I was looking at manufacturing, and since 2002, manufacturing had decreased by about 7%. That tells me, so if we're looking at the proportion of those in the manufacturing industry, in 2002, we were looking at 14.5, and now we're looking at 7.6. So, 2 questions, of course. One, is that reflective of what you see, and the second question is, was there an industry that closed or something?
I'm just,
Shane and Baldwin.
that wouldn't affect Jones.
Yeah, it would, because they commute. Mohawk,
Oh, okay.
right, so you have to think about where we travel to.
Okay.
So outside of the county for to manufacture, or is that based on manufacturing based in Jones County?
This is
This
Jones
is based
County
on
job.
in Jones County.
This is based
This
on.
is-
Yeah, this is in Jones County. So,
Swinco, the screening plant.
I was gonna say
Brand
the
new.
little spring plan and Hilton.
But no,
Yeah.
that's outside of the county.
so one thing that we could be seeing in this case is that you've just had other sectors growing more because this is as a percentage of 100, of everybody. So that could be part of it.
Yeah, but that's
It
pretty
doesn't look
big.
like it. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's also possible, and this is something very common we've seen across the region, is that in some businesses you sort of get the death by 1,000 cuts instead, where you've got a handful of small manufacturers who are doing things, and then maybe they had 10 people, but then it goes down to 8, then it goes down to 7, and pretty soon it starts showing up. And I'll give you the spoiler alert for the regional trend, which is every single area had a drop in manufacturing from the early 2000s to the early 2010s because recession, economic conditions there. In most of the other counties, there was a slight rebound in manufacturing that has not really happened in Jones County.
I would love to see the total number of jobs, not just the percent, so we could see how that is.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at 2011 and 2021, they're the same exact 7.6.
Yeah.
So it happened.
Yeah, maybe recessionary and then retirements, and like Greg says, just small transitions, maybe. So, just kind of moving on, I want to talk about housing on page number 10. So, just looking at housing conditions in Jones County, I will admit that comparatively to some of our counties, Jones, when you're looking at housing stock, has a higher proportion than some of our counties of homes that are from 1980 or newer. So what we're seeing in several locations that, there's several percentage of houses that are older, especially those that are renting. And so the question becomes, what conditions are those houses are in, and is there being replacement of houses? On the contrast, you could say for Jones County, we're looking at a large proportion of the houses being 1980 or newer. But from comments made, there may still not be enough readily available houses. Would that be a fair statement to say? Okay.
So we'll go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off of this number here. The census says that there is about a 17% vacancy rate of housing in Jones County. Raise your hand if you believe that. That's what I was thinking. I didn't raise my hand either, because, now, let me rephrase the question a little bit. If I told you that that includes houses that nobody would want to live in because they're in such bad shape, it also includes any houses that might be tied up in air property, they aren't on the market, but there are other factors that are keeping them from entering the market. Does that number at least sound a little bit more believable at that point?
Yes. Okay, that's kind of the comments I was trying to get to. That I appreciate Greg leading into.
We've been through enough of these meetings right now that I figured just rip the Band-Aid off on that topic, because that's also a trend we've seen in every single county of the vacancy rate always appears higher than it feels like. And I'm curious if anybody can speak to, sort of what are the current conditions in the housing market. I know you already spoke a little bit about that earlier, from what you see, but a lot of houses getting bought up.
We got a lot of investors coming in that are buying up all the houses they can, and the shortage of ones taking care of what they've got at the end of the day, so I still haven't figured that out. But, as far as the vacancy rate, if you got a rental house today, you got 5 people, putting an application on, and just saying there's nothing to find in Jones County. That's why I think we've got so many investors coming in this area looking at buying up all the available lots they can to build something and see an opportunity. We've got a 1,000-acre industrial park there that we hope one day is going to, take off. We got a lot of interest in it. We've got a lot of potential. A lot of NBO counties around us that are saying that, no, we got 1,000-acre industrial site available. But the biggest key comes back in, where you going to put the people that the industry coming in, because you go to all the surrounding counties, again, everything getting bought up. I've seen it firsthand. Mr. Martin, you hear too. They're coming in, buying everything. I mean, a lot of the sight of something, that's the craziest about it. They just buying it up because they know they can, and the numbers support the investment, even though it might not be the best investment.
Just kind of building on those comments. If we're looking at housing on how do I put it? Affordability, overall affordability, where, for instance, circumstances we've seen is like, based on the amount of salary an individual makes, like, say, a teacher, how much housing stock is available for that population that makes that income? Zero.
If a teacher can't afford to buy a house in Jones County, definitely not great.
Most of them can't even, a single moving into Jones County cannot even afford to rent. if they can find someone to rent.
So,
I mean, how many single educators?
I'm saying, you know, and,
Yeah.
we've had to go, you know, that's most of the applicants we get are single, one income, and it's, you know, it's embarrassing to have to go up on your rent. But, you know, they said, you're just getting greedy. No, I'm trying to stay in business because it's taking it that much to operate, and we're not high enough. But I see a trend of the new rent set versus where it was. I mean, basically, I'm literally seeing people that, if you're not making $36,000 a year, you can't afford to rent right now, you know. And it's saddening, but, you know, you have to, as an investor, you have to cover your expenses, and it gets to a point that, where do I, where do I say enough, you know? You be compassionate all you want, but at the end of the day, you're gonna be broke too, trying to help somebody out, and both of you are in bad shape.
I think the other scary indicator is that if the young population that's making $36,000 can afford it, the aging population that might be retiring. They're on fixed income, that's really scary. And if they were on fixed income prior to 2010, the COVID doesn't keep up with inflation. So I would hate to be a 70-year-old retired school bus driver trying to live in Jones County. Because the numbers
Don't even be a retired one, be one that works. Be real.
that part.
One thing that, you know, the state has, you know, they've been pushing a new rural workforce housing initiative program. And the range that they look at is if you're buying a new home, they specifically want to encourage homes that are like between the, I think, 125,000 price point and about the 290,000 price point as the range. And admittedly, a lot of the ones we've seen are on the higher end of that range because 125,000 is just darn near impossible to find nowadays. But would that, in theory, be the range that folks are generally looking for in Jones County where there is that shortage, or is that slightly different in one way or another?
I think that's the affordability space or range.
Yeah, but that's not what you see.
It's not
No.
practical.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a $120,000 house on the market.
Look at a 1970 built 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,500 square foot, on plus 3 acres, $179,000.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who's actively looking with a 210 price range and even in Jones County, I'm not finding anything that's habitable, or that's not immediately bought by a developer.
Yeah.
Before I can even contact my realtor.
So it would be nice if there was something that the state that was really willing to do, but it would also be even nicer if the builders had that capacity to build at that level. Square footage of land, prices have increased, and then the cost per square foot to build a house. I talked to a guy yesterday, it was $180 per square foot. And I was like, that's crazy, I thought it was $120, $150, come on in.
$175.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my office manager is also a realtor. Houses that are, she sold 4 years ago for $89,000. Same house now is $215,000.
Yeah.
Same footprint, same amount of land, everything. So
What are those new houses on Roller Street?
Yeah.
$495,000.
And they got people,
Yeah, so you're in somebody's backyard.
Are you trying to see in the signs that say from the low 400?
Yes.
Just make it 400.
Yeah.
Out of my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The low
495,000.
400.
So,
On Roller Street.
we own the houses behind it.
Yeah, that's in your back door. You're looking in their back door because it's elevated right up.
Yeah, that house
Yeah.
that's looking down at.
Yeah, that's Chris's house that is looking down it. That they built it up far enough to build and all the rain's going down yours.
Talking about water.
yeah. 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 So one of the things that we have heard is that impediment to new housing sometimes and to getting those housing starts going in the communities, not just Jones County, but around Middle Georgia and all, is that the places where you want to build may not have the infrastructure ready to support that housing. So like there may be affordable land, but there's not a road to get there, there's no water, and there's no sewer service. So that sort of brings into our next topic of infrastructure, which has far fewer prettier graphs just because water and sewer isn't as prone to pretty graphs as some other topics are. But that's one of the trends that we've heard regionally when we talk about that sort of hard infrastructure, is that there may not be the availability of it where we want it to go. We might have water that we can pull from. We don't have the water wars issues that they have in other parts of the state, but the delivery system of getting it from point A to point B, and then taking care of the wastewater on the back end of that is something where, and pardon the pun, is something where the infrastructure does need some more reinforcement or some more investment. And likewise, we've heard great progress being made in broadband getting expanded, but if it's not to your house yet, it's not here fast enough and not doing enough fast enough. So wanted to sort of get some thoughts on the infrastructure side of things, to see how is that developing in Jones County. I know y'all set yourselves up to make some really big investments in infrastructure, but wanted to open that up for some general discussion.
I think that's a good Jason question.
So on the water side of things, we're in the middle of a $20 million water project. It was funded through bonds and some of the COVID money through the state. Right now, we finished the initial phase of that. That was a little over $1 million. We're in the second phase now, which is about $5 million. And so we've got several other phases there, so we'll use up all that money. It includes both new wells and distribution lines, elevated storage tank. And then on the sewer side, we're working to tie on our industrial park. We just got a new GFA loan that'll help us finish that project. And so I think that'll give the industrial park a fighting chance once we have sewer in place there. And then on the broadband side, we're working with Tri-County on that project, about $5 million that goes beyond the EMC's traditional service area into some of the Georgia Power areas. So excited about what we've got going on always.
With all that happening, it's not enough. Ag still has some water issues. Bradley. South Jones, without question, out 49, Mount Springs and further. You've got challenges, and I'm sure Juliet's got water issues too, that we might not be aware of, that people are just dug in. This is how we live. We're going to buy our water, we're going to bring it in the truck, and we're going to fill up a tank, or it is what it is. So if the developer did come in and say, all right, we can start 200 homes, I say, Jason, and Jason will go, where?
Yeah. We're looking at an untold number of years when the infrastructure gets there to support those homes.
And even like, I think, last couple of years, we had some developers that wanted to do some senior housing in Gray. Those are part of the indicators or reasons why we could not do that project.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll do a brief plug. One of the state programs does fund the water sewer connection to a new development if you have a developer who wants to build and is committed to building. So file that away in your memory bank.
How far does it go? That's the question.
You can apply for up to $2.5 million, I think. Now, if you're asking for $2.5 million, it'd be good to get as many houses as you can for it. But
What's the cost share for government input on that?
no official requirement. The requirement is you have to have some skin in the game, but they didn't put a number on exactly what it is. So
The more skin you put, the better chance.
yeah, but
I went to that application, when is the grant period open and closed?
it's a rolling deadline. The key is you just need a developer who is committed to building the houses if you get the funding.
So are you all gonna do the application, or?
We can absolutely write that application if you find us a developer. We are not in the process of hunting for developers actively.
So I'm gonna ask this question on behalf of the county. can you prepare the paperwork so we have one ready to go? Because other counties are doing it, so we've got a template, if you can do that, because that'll be an incentive, like we're ready, almost shovel ready, to at least help you get water.
Yeah.
Because we have some challenges getting some businesses water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll make sure to coordinate that with Jason and with Tim if anybody comes to talk to him about it from the planning and zoning side too. So, but yeah. So, one of the other fun types of infrastructure are roads. You know, and not necessarily talking about, you know, the pothole that you might hit on your way into work on the day or something, but in terms of road network in general, we've heard some frustration at the regional level and some challenges that it may be a little bit difficult to get, you know, longer distances. So like in Jones County, it's not that traffic is that bad. But if you're trying to get to the other side of the region, it's kind of hard to cross the Ocmulgee. You're going to hit a traffic jam somewhere if you're going east to west. If you're trying to get up to Atlanta, you're going to hit a traffic jam somewhere, probably McDonough. Yeah. Yeah. Ah, okay. Yeah, and trains blocking the railroad track. Yeah. So those are some things that we've heard there. Any other sort of transportation challenges that you see, or things that are going well regarding, you know, roads, streets, transit?
Not enough money to pay for dirt roads.
They're doing a great job keeping the dirt roads up down.
They are.
And I really appreciate that. Our roads stay in great shape. I will say our county does an outstanding job.
And I don't disagree with that. We do. And driving a bus on them, I know a lot of them. And, but it's still that we've run out of money to pave dirt roads, replacing pavement on paved roads. And that's frustrating, but we just don't have the revenue there.
Because paved roads are misused.
So what I was gonna say, if the addendum is, we don't even have enough to pay the pay roads, because we just did a road study. And we are, how many miles, half as much
How many miles?
of paved roads do we need pavement or rework? Well, how many roads, how about that?
400 something miles, right? Pavement?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and count. I know 2% of our roads, 2 point something, were completely failed. Like, you know.
And that's just paved roads.
And yeah, this is just on paved roads. And then there was a lot of orange and yellow on the map. I'd have to go check the mileage. It's not coming back to me, but yeah, there was a substantial portion of the existing asphalt that needs a lot of work.
And what you get from the state through LMIG is probably enough to pave, you know, like 4 or 5 miles of road a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Half of it used to be.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason, your failing roads not completely failed, maybe 40-some-odd%, 49%, so from our last meeting.
That's probably
It was a high
right.
percentage.
Mhm.
It's an untold amount of money it takes to repair it.
And
Yeah.
you said, what about the, what roads?
It's a misuse of roads, overweight vehicles on the wrong roads.
Sometimes you could build a road for $180 a foot, that's with infrastructure. And then it went to $360 a foot. And I couldn't even figure it because I said, it's a dollars and cents. There's not enough dollars that don't make sense to do, anymore. And, because of the costs associated with it. Again, like our elbow, we're literally, and I think I'm correct, we're paving half the amount of roads with elbows that we used to pave. It's all about the cost of doing it. And, our elbow list 8 years ago, Mr. Martin, was pretty substantial.
Yeah, you can almost do a couple miles per district now, and you feel you can get a couple miles out of it.
Well, and we don't have public transportation, not that everybody's crazy about public transportation, but if you had public transportation, you could reduce the number of vehicles on the roads, which is reducing the wear, but we're so far from that. I mean, to me, that's not even a realistic way
Well,
to save the roads.
Then you wouldn't have enough people to employ to put to use in that seat to drive that public, because you don't have enough bus drivers right now to transport your students to school. So you've got your increase of parents driving kids to school because you don't have bus drivers. So if you're going to open up public transportation for your county or city or district, you've got to have those employable people.
Yeah, and the county does do a demand response system.
Yes.
Three of the vans that are out on the roads. So, but I'm guessing, is that mainly working hours, Monday to Friday?
Yes, we do get a grant, though, we're gonna be able to
Okay.
expand to some Saturday hours.
Okay.
It would be nice if Macon Transit Authority would provide the option to come into the more densely occupied spaces, because I think that would also help with employment. Theoretically speaking, from a youth perspective, we don't have the youth jobs, and we definitely don't have transportation for youth to get to work during those workplace lending hours, because parents are at work. So if a bus literally could come into Gray and pick up kids at school, and then transport them to Shasta River Crossing, or downtown Macon, that would help, right? Theoretically, on the south side of the county, if they made it to Central Point, let's say the high school is dropping off at Clifton Ridge, then you have a bus that could take those kids and get employment, and that would help long term, right? Kids would be accustomed to public transportation, and they would help with the employability numbers that we have in the county. So,
Okay.
make a connection, making transit good.
Got that as a note. So, yeah.
Buy some horses.
Yeah. So just sort of to briefly touch on other services here that we haven't talked about yet. Healthcare and public safety is sort of the last, big set of those that we do hear from a bunch of folks about. Some of the pros being that, the communities, especially when you get to the rural areas, are safe, friendly, small towns, which is really a testament to the public safety side of things. And that's something we've heard is a big positive throughout the region. And that, even in some of the rural areas, healthcare services have not been as disproportionately hurt as in some other parts of the state, in terms of many of our rural counties do still have hospitals, and haven't lost as many of those as you might have seen, if you go further into South Georgia, for example. But then on the flip side, some challenges from the fire protection side. That has, generally been seen as a challenge in some communities when we talk about threats in terms of, ISO ratings being high means a lot. The folks have to spend on insurance. The water distribution systems tying back into infrastructure may make it a little bit harder to get, folks out there, and recruitment of volunteers is very different. It's very difficult for fire departments. We've also heard in many cases that EMS services are not as fast or responsive as folks would be looking for in terms of being able to respond to those medical calls that come in. So wanted to see if those trends also tend to line up with things that y'all are hearing, or if you have any additional thoughts on public health or public safety in the community.
I think, yes, the EMS part of it, there is the call, and you've got to look at that as the medical center may have 12 units that are supposed to be on duty that day, but they may be short-staffed and we've got 10. So we're in that rotation for them. So you're gonna, a lot of times it's quicker to throw them in a vehicle and get them to the hospital. But as far as our rescue or fire department showing up, you do have someone to show up for that, but not near as many volunteers as what we once had to.
I mean, that's a nationwide problem
Yes,
across the board.
true.
And,
It's not just here. I think
it's an age thing. The older the population gets, the younger ones are less likely to volunteer. That's a nationwide problem also.
Yep.
I would love to see the EMT and fire program at the high school level, and I know we started EMS right this year. And I'd love to see the impact of that over time, but we know that if we don't do something, our volunteer fire department will shrink even more. Come on in. I do believe that the ISO rating is also impacting economic development because if a corporation wants or needs a full-time fire department, we don't have that. That's another driver and indicator of why they won't come, right? Because the risk is high. So if there's anything at the state level that can help smaller counties facilitate that, that would be great. We just applied for one of the grants and unfortunately we didn't get it, which would help undergird our fire department. But there has to be something regionally and statewide that can help facilitate that. Because if you don't, you can get in the wind on it. The insurance costs, again, back to fixed income folks. Allstate just did another increase. If you didn't have Allstate, you don't know. If you got Allstate, you felt it. And if you didn't feel it, well, congratulations. But there's a whole bunch of people that got that 20% rate hike. So if there's support for improving ISO, support for fire departments, that's great.
Yeah.
Am I remembering right, and I don't know exactly where I'm remembering this from, but if you start out as a firefighter, there's a path where you can become an EMT as a part of a program, so you can improve your job situation all the way up to a fully trained EMT and a paramedic or something. But you can start as a firefighter and move through that, so that's an employment opportunity for somebody who doesn't want to leave the county, and it helps us at the same time with our volunteer situation. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of that. I don't know if we promote it. Surely we do.
Yeah, Jason, I don't know, is that a program the county has, or I know some communities have set up something similar to that, but.
I think that's statewide somewhere, because I heard that from somewhere other than Jones County.
Okay.
I know when I became an EMT, you were an EMT and you had to be on the road for at least 2 years to get into paramedic school. Now you can go straight EMT, straight into paramedic school. So there's you don't have to have any hands-on experience or anything. You go straight into paramedic school. I do know that still goes on.
I think I heard that at a conference in Atlanta from a gentleman who was trying to promote firefighters, volunteerism, and that whole segment of workforce. That was a path up through on-the-job training.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment about that, please.
Sure.
I've had a recent opportunity to deal with the volunteer folks on fire and on medical. I'm going to tell you what, top shelf. Y'all may be short on folks and that kind of thing, but the people that do respond are committed. The ones I have dealt with are extremely knowledgeable, so kudos to the people that are involved with that. There may not be enough of them, and there may not be new folks, but those people are pretty inspiring. I mean, I'm not really cut out to be a medical response person, but it's not my. But the ones that I've dealt with recently, that really fires what I deal with more than anything, responding to fire alarms. But there was a medical incident in the past year, and the people that showed up were, I had never really dealt with a medical response from our folks, and the people that showed up were top shelf. I was really very impressed. So, there's challenges, but we got great people in this county that are committed to that volunteer initiative.
Yeah.
Well,
that is very true.
We had a fire issue, a family member did. It wasn't an emergency fire issue, but those who responded, they were very professional, knowledgeable. So, yes.
And amazingly fast for volunteers. Amazingly fast for volunteers. Boom. Yeah. Unbelievable, actually.
I do think there's an opportunity on the ambulance side as well. Is it Baldwin County that gets dispatched to Brady? I think I remember some of that during the contractual times.
Brady provides the EMS service in Baldwin. They've kind of got arms all over the state doing that kind of thing. It's almost like I guess there's some affiliation with the hospital in Atlanta, but
I think their contract.
Now,
Yeah, they don't take them all the way to
That's
the
a-
bank.
Naxa just
County
took over.
discontinued contract with.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Now operates in Baldwin County.
Okay.
Because I remember that was part of it, and they actually at the time had a faster response time than our local, which was interesting. So I'm curious to watch how that's going to play out.
Stations involved.
Right. And I know we're going to get some more activity, but it was just interesting to think about the reach of that hospital and how far it's away and why it was this close to us, and even having a better response time. So I hope that we continue to do that, because as our aging population grows, even in the youth side of that, you're going to have a higher demand for the medical services.
Definitely. Yeah, and one of the last sort of health topics I want to briefly touch on is, and we've heard this in several communities as well too, that, a threat to the population as a whole is mental health services, also for folks dealing with substance abuse or addiction. That has been a challenge. And I know that Jones County on the mental health side of that has really taken some great strides in that regard, especially through the school system. But I wanted to see if anybody else had, thoughts or anything else you wanted to add in that regard as a opportunity or a need for additional attention.
I think in the school, we've got already in the school system, and then we've got these kids and young adults that are getting this service while they're in the school, and then they go out, and they're the ones that stay within our county, and there's not a lot of resources there for the mental health side.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say, even in the school system, there's never enough.
Never.
There's never enough support for mental health. We've even got pre-K children dealing with mental health issues, 4-year-olds. And that's hard. And the agencies now can't treat any child under 5. They've gotta be at least 5.
We just got a grant, us in New Jersey just got a federal grant called Tippy Toes, which is toddler and infant mental health services, because they can't, and so that's something that we're having to take on, and we're starting to see more and more children under the age of 5.
It's so significant in females, the Youth Challenge Program the 2 campuses have reduced their, capacity that they're willing to take by 75%, because the young females are so challenging and we don't take severe situations, we only take ones that we feel like we can safely handle, and they've cut that down by 75% in the last year.
Within the last year or so, the sheriff talked about the mental health challenges on the facility side of those that were incarcerated. And that number was not necessarily driven by people who just commit crimes, it was as a manifestation of the mental health condition. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, and I wish he was here, but we have somebody to share that data. Because we're expensing it on that side, right? And I would probably agree that it's probably still not adequate, right? And it's set up to do that. Right, we're not designed for that. And literally, if we had the resources, we definitely want to deploy that to the youth side, in my opinion, right? But I would love to see any additional supports that we can have to facilitate that.
Because they can't cut their capacity by 75% and say, this is all we can handle.
Correct.
I'm sorry, now, Hush. What you're saying and what we're hearing here, we talk about aging populations. Sometimes there's money to hire those counselors. There are no counselors.
Right.
And I don't know if it's the aging, if it's the whole aging population, if it's our young people who get a degree in something where they make more money. It's that service industry. I mean, it's that service kind of thing, healthcare, counseling. That yes, I'm not doing that, or teaching. I'm not doing that. You don't make any money in that. If I'm going to school, I'm going to get a degree in something where I can support my family. And so I don't know, are we talking about the service, more of our service, jobs, employment, that we don't, we're losing people in those areas.
Well,
And
it's so stressful, the work is so stressful relative to what they get paid,
it is,
that the trade-off is not worth it, and they go into another field.
And I can say this as a board, I don't know that our community is as open to the small group in the home neighborhood opportunities that other communities are doing, where it's an assisted living or a group home that addresses that need because of the stigmatism associated with just the name. And I think we have some of those opportunities, and those really supported from an education standpoint, we might be able to address some of that at a local level. And if they are counselors, right, at least now I can create a business or industry around it, and I don't have to leave and go start at a hospital because my county won't let me do it in my county, in my home.
Well, I think we've had some great conversation here, and we've been talking for almost an hour and a half, which that was our goal was to get y'all out before then, and we've still got a little bit of time here, but wanted to talk a little bit about next steps here, and then get y'all up here to look at these maps as our last activity. We'll hang out a little bit longer, so if there is anything that you really wanted to talk about or that we needed to talk about in the plan that we have not talked about yet, come find us afterwards. But first want to highlight a few of the next things, next opportunities for continued engagement. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going around to all 11 of our counties. Jones County is county number eight that we've been to now. So we're making progress. And that means that probably within about a month or so, we'll be looking to have our recap meetings regionally, where we bring folks back together and really parse through some of this data that we've heard from all of our communities and work on developing a work plan for the Middle Georgia Regional Commission of how we're going to work to address these things and how we're going to partner with our communities on those topics. So by virtue of being here in the room today, we want to make sure that all of you stay informed of that process, and as well as having an opportunity to see and review the draft document that we'll put out probably sometime early April-ish. In that time frame. So I know there's a sign-in sheet up here up front, and I see a few names on it, and I see a lot more than a few people here. So please do remember to come and sign in on the sign-in sheet before you leave, so that we can make sure to keep you informed and engaged with what's going on here. One other thing you can do for homework, if you're interested in it, is you'll notice that on the agenda we have a link to our website for the regional plan as well as a QR code. And that takes you to our regionally important resources plan nomination form as well too. That's another effort that we're doing concurrently, and we'll talk a little bit about this on the maps up here. But if there are really unique features, sites that we need to make sure we notate in Jones County. For example, the Old Clinton Historic District is currently on that list. Y'all are already on that list, so I could see where your mind was going there, Arlene. But if there are any others that we need to make sure that we include, feel free to fill out one of those nomination forms and send it back in to us. We also have a few hard copies if you want to take one there too. But that's just as we are going throughout the communities, we're trying to inventory those important sites, whether that's from a natural resources perspective or a cultural resources perspective. We're just looking for feedback on that as well too. That brings us to our last activity, and there won't be a formal, dismissal or anything because there's another meeting here in about 30 minutes or so. So we won't tell everybody to leave before that meeting because Jason wouldn't want that. But also, just you can filter in or out as you're done. But we've got two maps up front here that we want some feedback on as well too. This one over here, Alex will be at. This is the development patterns map, where we're looking broadly at our areas of the county already developed. Are they growing areas? Are they rural areas? Or are they the areas that we're trying to make sure are not growing as fast because of the natural and cultural resources that may be out there, for example? You can also come over here and look at this map, which has some of those regionally important resources we talked about earlier highlighted. It also has areas highlighted that are designated as like in the redevelopment plans for the communities, or areas that need additional special attention or just special interest for some reason. Maybe it's special planning for new infrastructure or rapid growth or any of those topics. So these are the two maps that we invite you to come up here, take a look at. and just chat with us for a little bit. We appreciate your time here for joining us this evening. And at this point, we will go ahead and adjourn for continued discussions and/or a break before your next meeting, if you would prefer that too. So, thank you again very much, and please remember to sign the sign-in sheet here before you leave. So, yes, and thank you, Jason, Board of Commissioners, for hosting us as well too.
All right, I need to give you. So have you got our scenic byway?
Yeah, do y'all know that Tatnall got a $300,000 back on rent for buses,
This
right?
is included in
They
there.
can buy 3 buses
It's
in our
not showing up on there
The
right
federal
now.
government would have which is.
Sarah, now, you see Jason,
They can't go on dirt roads, they have more dirt roads than they have paved roads. They were like, what do you want us to do with this electrical bus that you guys want us to
I was
talk
a
about?
transportation director, I just left that
Yeah,
position.
they were like, no, we're getting the 3 diesel buses, leave us alone.
I went propane
You know,
and got the $12,000 grant.
yeah.
what is this one right here?
But yeah,
So, in the last little bit, that's the Bradley and the Wayside schools right there. Yeah, and those were highlighted as areas that, I think the last time we did this plan, folks said, like, yeah, we want to make sure that those areas get a little bit of extra TLC basically. In terms of, making sure that there's special focus on development